Hi, my name is Rosalie Kraines, and today I'll be presenting on the influences of Gothic literature on modern queer media. So before I get into the actual content, why should we care about this topic? Well, so the picture on the slide is an image of the Stonewall Riots, a turning point for queer rights in America. Queer people have long been discriminated against, and art, including literature, is a way for people to express themselves with less fear of retribution. Also, the point of this course is that analyzing Gothic literature improves our understanding and thinking skills. Throughout the class, we've been comparing Gothic literature from hundreds of years ago to modern day, which shows us that the Gothic is still relevant today. Connecting the Gothic to queer media is another way to show us how the Gothic has so much more to explore besides just the invocation of fear. It also allows us to have personal connections with the Gothic. Here's the table of contents. First, I'll talk about the concept of the other and why it's so important in both Gothic and queer media. Then I'll describe how both genres have traditionally broken boundaries in literature and in other places. Next is secrets. Secrets and secret keeping is a common plot point in both genres, and I'll dive into that a bit. Last, there are some miscellaneous topics that I felt it was important to talk about, but that didn't really fit anywhere else in the presentation. So first is the concept of the other. The other, or the one that is unlike all the quote-unquote normal people, is an essential part of both genres. In Gothic literature, there is often a monster, whether that be an actual supernatural monster or a monstrous human, that acts as a villain for the entire book. In queer media, the queer characters are often made to feel like they are the other. So these are a few images on the concept of the other. The first image in the top left is Gaston leading a mob in the movie Beauty and the Beast. In this Disney film, the titular beast is a perfect other. He is thought of as ugly and he scares the villagers. Near the end of the movie, Gaston brings a crowd of villagers armed with torches and weapons to kill the beast. Though the beast has never actually done anything monstrous to the village, they fear him and shun him just because he doesn't look like them. This scene is a classic depiction of the mob mentality, where people adopt the beliefs of those around them and think that they must be part of a group who shares behaviors and actions. The mob mentality can often lead to a few people being shunned from the larger society, where if one person turns on another, the rest will follow that one person's lead. The image on the right is a picture of the Stonewall Riots, which were riots for LGBTQ rights that happened in New York in 1969. These protests were a way for queer people to band together and fight against the society that has ostracized them for so long. They also showed that even though many people felt alone in this fight, there were actually a lot of people who had gone through the same experience, and so the purported other is not as small of a minority as they were made to believe. The final thing on this slide is a quote from Bell Hooks. As the essence of queer, I think of queer not as being about who you're having sex with, that can be a dimension of it, but queer as being about the self that is at odds with everything around it, and it has to invent and create and find a place to speak and to thrive and to live. Queer people have had to find their own space when they are not accepted in heterosexual societies, and they are sometimes seen as monstrous, just like some Gothic antagonists misunderstood by the public. Gothic antagonists have also had to find their own space. Next is breaking boundaries. Throughout history, the most prominent figures in literature have been straight white men. However, many people have been working to change this by writing about topics that have not been as safe or as familiar to audiences, such as with queer literature, books revolving around people of color written by people of color, or feminist novels. On this slide, I've put pictures of 3 authors that have broken literary boundaries throughout their careers. The first author, all the way to the left, is Carmen Maria Machado. We are familiar with her through her novel In the Dream House, which is not a traditional novel in any sense. Half memoir and half fiction, In the Dream House is about Machado's volatile relationship with another woman, referred to as the woman in the dream house. Even in Gothic fiction, which has broken boundaries by itself, the main character of In the Dream House is rare to see as a modern queer woman of color. In the Dream House is a great example of modern Gothic fiction about modern problems, and the queer aspects are discussed at length, with Machado describing how domestic violence in the queer community is not talked about as much as domestic violence in heterosexual relationships. The second author, in the middle, is Bell Hooks. As a Black woman born in 1952 in a segregated town, Hooks experienced many obstacles in her path to become a well-known writer, but she had a successful career and wrote many essays on race, class, gender, and the intersection of all 3. She talked often about the effect of racism and sexism on Black women, especially in her 1981 book, Ain't I a Woman? Black Women and Feminism, titled after Sojourner Truth's 1851 speech about the treatment of white women as compared to Black women. In the book, Hooks describes how the early ways of feminism were often only useful for white women who did not want to include Black women in their feminism. The last author on this slide is Anne Radcliffe. A well-known Gothic author in the late 1700s and early 1800s, Radcliffe was a successful female author in a time where many successful authors were men. She created new roles for her female heroines by letting them be the protagonists of their own stories, often overtaking male villains without help from a dashing hero. In her day, she was an incredibly popular Gothic romance author, being called the Shakespeare of romance writers by some critics. She also inspired many other famous authors after her, such as Fyodor Dostoevsky and Edgar Allan Poe. The next topic is secrets. Gothic literature is often characterized by a secret door or room where a villain is hidden. Many of the characters keep secrets from each other, creating an air of tension and confusion from both the readers and the characters, which heightens the fear and suspense of the novel. In queer media, secrets are common, but they are less about precarity and supernatural peril, and more about modern fears, often the fear of coming out. Secrets in both genres deal with hiding one's true self or true feelings. So the first image on this slide on the bottom left is a cartoon of a queer person in the closet, hiding among the shoes and behind a rainbow of shirts. It can be assumed from this cartoon that the person is afraid to come out due to a possible fear of rejection. The book cover in the top middle, Simon vs. the Homo sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli, deals with a similar fear. The main character, Simon, is gay, but he's scared to tell his friends and family and can only confide in a fellow closeted gay kid at his school, even though neither Simon nor the other boy actually know each other's identities. Both worry about the rejection and ostracization they might face if they come out, which goes back to the concept of the other. They know they are seen as the other, but they do not know what the reaction to revealing their true selves could be, and it has such a high likelihood to be negative. The other two images are about secrets in the Gothic. The image right below the book cover is of the Forbidden West Wing in Beauty and the Beast. Initially, the Beast tells Belle she cannot go into the West Wing, but when she sneaks in, she realizes the truth about the rose and how the Beast will die if he cannot find someone who loves him before the rose withers away. The West Wing is secret and locked and creates tension between the two main characters. This secret is very similar to the last image, which shows the locked attic from Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. In the novel, it turns out that this room, which has been forbidden to Jane since she arrived at Thornfield Hall, is hiding Mr. Rochester's mentally insane wife who acts as the villain of the novel. Both this room and the West Wing from Beauty and the Beast are classic depictions of the traditional locked trapdoor or room from the Gothic novel, and even though the secret of being closeted does not carry the same menace, they create similar atmospheres of fear and tension in the novels. Last, here are some miscellaneous connections between the Gothic and queer media that didn't fit in any of the other topics, but that I felt it was important to touch on. So first of these is the trope of the lesbian vampire. This really started with Joseph Sheridan Le Fano's 1877 novel Carmilla, depicted in the picture on the top left, which predates Dracula as a vampire novel. Carmilla follows a female vampire who preys on a young girl and includes many descriptions of female sexuality and a seemingly loving relationship between the two main female characters. The vampire makes romantic and sexual advances towards Laura, the protagonist, and Laura is not unwilling. There is a clear connection between the two, and Laura states that she feels both attraction and repulsion towards the titular Carmilla. This story has been adapted many times, such as into a popular Canadian web series by the same name that was later made into a movie, which is the image on the right. In Carmilla, the movie and the series, Carmilla and Laura are in a clear romantic relationship. The image in the middle is of Elizabeth Bathory, a Hungarian countess who lived from 1560 to 1614 and was alleged to be a serial killer, especially of young girls and women. Bathory is possibly one of the inspirations for popular vampire novels such as Dracula or Carmilla, as folklore about her often described how she showed traits of vampirism. Bathory was captured at her castle in a witch hunt in 1611 and detained for the remainder of her life, eventually dying in August of 1614, after which stories about her spread. The last image of this slide, just below the original drawing of Carmilla on the left, is of the Netflix show First Kill. Based on a short story by author Victoria Schwab, First Kill is about the romantic relationship between two girls, one of whom is a vampire and the other of whom comes from a family of monster hunters. The vampire, Juliet, is supposed to make her first kill in order to become a fully fledged vampire, and on the flip side, the monster hunter, Calliope, must slay her first monster in order to become a recognized hunter by her family. Though the two are at odds, they eventually fall in love and must decide between their attraction and their family's expectations for them. And the last slide is a few examples of queer modern Gothic. The first show I have listed is What We Do in the Shadows. Based on the movie of the same name directed by Taika Waititi, What We Do in the Shadows is the story of 4 vampires, Nandor, Laszlo, Nadia, and Colin, along with Guillermo, Nandor's human familiar. What We Do in the Shadows is rare for Gothic shows in that it's filmed in a comedy mockumentary style along with the typical horror elements, and does not feature only horror. It also features many casually queer characters, with Laszlo and Nadia being in a relationship but also being pansexual and often having separate relationships with all people of all sexes. Guillermo, the human, also comes out in a later season. I have included a quote from executive producer Paul Sims about the queerness of the show. He says, "Vampires are so accepting. They've seen everything. I remember we were having one conversation early on, and I was saying, would vampires be prejudiced? And then we decided, no. They've just lived so much time that everyone seems the same. And also, to them, it's vampires and then all the humans. And who cares what kind of humans they are?" He also said that any character in the show could be read as queer. The second poster is for the 2022 show Interview with the Vampire, based on Anne Rice's novels of the same name. In the show, the homosexual relationship between the two main vampires, Lestat and Louis, which was only implied in the original novels and the 1994 film, is fully embraced, with Lestat and Louis being clearly romantically connected from the first episode. Finally, the last image is the cover of In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. I will not discuss this novel at length, since we've already discussed it, but it is a great example of a modern novel that is both queer and Gothic. In conclusion, much of queer media is inherently influenced by the Gothic, and they share many similarities such as the concept of the other, breaking traditional boundaries in media, and the use of secrets to advance the plot. There are many examples of queer Gothic media today, but the genre has much more exploration that can be done in the future. Thank you.